Welcome, folks, to Crypto News Global. I'm your host, Nick Toka, and today is the day Trump imposes 10% tariff on all countries around the world, reciprocal levies on trading partners. We're going to go through exactly what that means and who are being tariffed, which countries, and exactly which countries. We're going to go down the entire list. We're also going to get into some Bitcoin technical analysis. But moreover, this show is about these tariffs today, what it's going to mean to Bitcoin, crypto, and what's happening to the markets right now. Additionally, what's going to happen to everybody's pocketbooks, right? That's what we're all thinking about. All this and so much more on today's show. Welcome, folks, to Crypto News Global. I'm your host, Nick Toka. Today is April 2nd, 2025, and the tariff day that we've all been waiting for, April 2nd, and the tariffs did go down at 4 p.m. Eastern as promised. And today we're going to go through things a little bit differently. We're going to go through our story first because I want to go through this information before you guys hear it from me first. So, Trump imposes 10% tariff on all countries, reciprocal levies on trading partners. United States President Donald Trump signed an executive order establishing reciprocal tariffs on trading partners and a 10% baseline tariff on all imports from all countries. The reciprocal levies on will be approximately half of what trading partners charge for U.S. imports, Trump said. For example, China currently has a tariff of 67% on U.S. imports, so U.S. reciprocal tariffs on Chinese goods will be 34%. Trump also announced a standard 25% tariffs on all automobile imports. Trump told the media that tariffs would return the country to economic prosperity seen in previous centuries. And I've been calling for this. I am so proud today, actually. I front ran BlackRock in the Bitcoin, largest asset manager in the world. And then I front ran Trump in these decisions. In fact, I sent him a tweet about this. Not that he listened to me, but at least 6 months ago, talking about exactly this. And let's continue with the story before you think of me as, good or bad or whatever. By the end of this article, you're going to think that his plan is actually brilliant, and it's going to bring us back to a more profitable, pleasant time in U.S. history. So, the reciprocal tariffs will be approximately half of what the trading partner puts on them right now. Trump told the media that tariffs would return the country to economic prosperity seen in previous centuries. And we've talked about this before, folks, on this show. From 1789 to 1913, we were a tariff-backed nation. Many countries were tariff-backed nations. The United States was proportionately the wealthiest it has ever been. So wealthy, in fact, that in the 1880s, they established a commission to decide what they were going to do with the vast sums of money they were collecting from tariffs. Then, in 1913, for reasons unknown to mankind, they established the income tax so that citizens rather than foreign countries would start paying, Trump said. He's absolutely bang on here. These are all the countries. We're going to zoom in on this and go through this list momentarily, but let's still continue with the story. Trump presented the tariffs through the lens of economic protectionism and hinted at returning the economic policies of the 19th century by using them to replace the income tax. Trump proposes eliminating federal income tax and replacing it with tariff revenue. We talked about this. Trump proposed the idea of abolishing the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, and funding the federal government exclusively through trade tariffs while still on the campaign trail in 2024. According to the accounting automation company Dancing Numbers, Trump's plan could save each American taxpayer $134,000 to $325,000 in taxes throughout their lives. The higher range of the tax savings estimate will only occur if other wage-based taxes are eliminated at the state and municipal levels. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who assumed office in February, also voiced support for replacing the IRS with the External Revenue Service. Lutnick said that the U.S. government cannot balance a budget yet consistently demands more from its citizens every year. Tariffs will also protect American workers and strengthen the U.S. economy, he said. So, that's a bit of a... All you're going to hear in media today is Trump tariffs the world, right? But I'd like to hear, I try not to watch CNN, folks, or, a lot of the mainstream shit that they're putting on. I used to work for one of these media companies, and so I'm in IT. And I was actually the guy, when I say media companies, I'm talking about the second biggest media company in the country. So I used to be in IT, and I was the guy who was in charge of many things, but one of the things I was also in charge with, which they deemed, IT related, was the newswire. Okay? So the only newswire, you think that, you turn on the channel and there's one news channel, then there's another news channel, another news channel, another news channel, right? They all get their news from the one news channel, Reuters. There's only one. That's it. It comes in on this little DOS, it was basically this little modem, about yay big, and the news information comes through this little modem. This modem translates it into like a DOS type text. It literally comes up like, like this, right? This is what you get. And then the news wire is just like coming in like this, just basic text, right? Everybody gets the same one. Then, of course, the editors take it and then they change it a bit into whatever. Maybe they add a few words and they take away a few words. But ultimately, every single media company is getting the exact same news from the exact same news wire. So this is why you're listening to the same shit no matter which channel you turn it on. Of course, and I'm talking about the main headlines, right? Of course, when, the headlines are done, then they might go into some local news, fireman rescues cat, or these types of Good Samaritan thing, or bad stories, etc. But the national and international headlines all come in through this news wire, and they all get it all from the same Reuters news network, right? I was there. I've seen it firsthand. I'm not bullshitting anybody. These are the facts. So I try not to listen to this crap because I know it's all the same news and it's all coming from Reuters. So whatever Reuters decides to put out as the news, that's what everybody's going to read. So I haven't turned on CNN, but I am just doubtful that we're going to see anything about this second part of the story. Trump proposes eliminating federal income tax and replacing it with tariff revenue. Basically cutting the tax, 100% of the tax for citizens, and instead replacing it with tariff revenue. Let's go through the countries. I doubt we're going to see anything like that. I'm going to turn it on out of curiosity. I'm going to check out CNN in a bit, and I'll see what they say. So let's dig deeper here into the tariffs fast. So we've got on the left the blue, and the blue and white is the tariff that the country currently has, or historically and currently has, on U.S. goods. So that means if the States was sending anything to one of these countries, they had this percentage in the blue column. So let's take China, for example. If the States was sending anything to China, China was charging 67% tariff. So the yellow column on the right is the new tariff that Trump is going to charge for goods coming into the U.S. All right, so he's charging half as much as what the other country is currently charging. So China is charging 67% for whatever the U.S. Is sending it. So on U.S. goods sent to China, so China would consider this U.S. imports, right? It's 67%. And now for American imports, so things that are coming from China to the States, they're now going to put a 34% tariff on that. The States are. This is what was announced today. The yellow is basically what was announced today. The blue is what's been ongoing from all these countries. So let's continue on. European Union, 39% they were charging in tariffs. So now the States is going to charge 20%. Vietnam, 90%. So we're making it 46%. Taiwan, 64%. We're making ours 32%. Japan, 46%. We're making ours 24%. Again, pretty much approximately half. And he even said approximately, right? Half of what the other country has been charging. India, 52%. Now the States, 26%. South Korea, 50%. States now 25% tariff. Thailand, 72%. The States now 36%. Switzerland, 61%. The States now 31% tariff on any imports coming from Switzerland. Indonesia, 64%. States now 32%. Malaysia, 47%. States 24%. Cambodia, 97%. States 49%. UK, United Kingdom, 10%. And this is the minimum here we're seeing for the first time. No matter which country you are, there's now a 10% tariff on every country, right? So UK was charging 10% tariff. Now the States is 10% tariff. So they're not, the minimum is 10%. They're not like, oh, because the UK is charging 10, we're going to charge 5. No, the minimum for every country around the world now is 10% tariff for anything going from the originating country into the States. So imports into the States, 10% for everybody. South Africa, 60%. US now 30%. Brazil, 10%, and US 10%. Bangladesh, 74%, US 37%. Singapore, 10%, US 10%. Israel, 33%, US 17%. Philippines, 34%, US 17%. Chile, 10%. US 10%, Australia 10%, US 10%, Pakistan 58%, US 29%, Turkey 10%, US 10%, Sri Lanka 88%, US 44%, Colombia 10%, US 10%. Now, what's interesting here, folks, we're going to go through the rest of the list in a minute. That was half of them. And remember, if you're not in this list of countries, you're still being charged now a 10% tariff, no matter which country you are. But what's really interesting here is something that we and I didn't know about. I knew, everybody tariffed a little bit, but I thought tariffs were like 2%, 4%, minimal amounts. I had no freaking idea. China has a 67% tariff on the States. No wonder everybody's pissed off. Korea, 50%. Cambodia, 97%. Are you fucking kidding me? Bangladesh, look at your shirt, right? every time you buy something new, look at the label. I'm sure it says Bangladesh on it. 74% Bangladesh. Sri Lanka, 88%, another big textile country. Vietnam, another big textile country. Like, it's just insane. So now, okay, you want your textile industry to run well. You, Vietnam, better reduce your tariffs. You want a lower tariff? You better go back to 10%, right? So this very much is a leverage play, all right? If tomorrow the European Union says, oh, you know what? We didn't know we were charging 39% tariffs or some bullshit they just make up, right? We'll bring it down to 10%. Then I'm sure Trump will bring the U.S. tariff down to 10%. So think of the leverage here, right? If you want your goods, suddenly you had no tariff in the States. Okay, there was always no tariff, no tariff. The other country was charging 50% tariff, 70%, 88, 90% tariffs. So everybody's saying, oh, the tariffs are going to raise prices. Oh my God, what's going to happen? Everything's going to get so expensive. It's the end of the world. And, you know, that's, I'm sure, what CNN is going to say when I turn it on later and listen. But think of it on a smart level, folks. Okay? So all of a sudden, China, who's been charging a 67% tariff on what's probably everything, I'm not quite sure, all goods, suddenly they had, up until now, no tariff on sending their goods to the U.S. All of a sudden, there's a 34% tariff, right? What's China going to turn around and do? They're going to say, shit, we can't afford a 34% tariff. What we're going to have to do is lower our own tariffs in order to get the U.S. tariffs lowered. So if China says, okay, well, we're going to then lower our tariffs to 20%, then the U.S. will then tariff them 10%. Hopefully these countries are bright enough to understand. I don't think they are, personally. I think there might be a couple of these countries that are going to be smart enough to come out and say, hey, you know what if we lower our tariffs? Will that make a difference? Could you then lower the U.S. tariffs? You know, it's just interesting that certain countries here already have a reasonable tariff, right? UK, 10%. Brazil, 10%. Brazil, who's not like a freaking economic powerhouse, Brazil's been, you know, their economy's tanking, right? It's just insanity. You know, Indonesia, huge countries here. Switzerland, 61%. Thailand, 72%. India, 52%. Like, why do they have these massive tariffs on the states? It's just really interesting. I had no idea this type of tariffing system existed worldwide, and I'm happy that they've brought it to the forefront here. But, you know, Singapore, 10%. Chile, 10%. Australia, 10%. Turkey, 10%. Colombia, 10%. These are not economic powerhouses around the world, but yet they weren't gouging the states like some of these other bastards, right? South Africa, 60%. Switzerland, 60% tariffs? Seriously? Let's go on with our list. So that was half the countries. Again, everybody's getting a 10% blanket tariff. And these are specific countries that they've put out a list for reciprocal tariffs. So clearly, some of these countries have been gouging the states, and now it's payback time, right? Or at least it's negotiation time. That's the way I look at it. So Peru had again, in the blue column here, the tariff that was in the country. So if the States was sending any goods to Peru, Peru was charging a 10% tariff. And now, before it was apparently 0% tariff if things were being imported from Peru, but now there's a 10% tariff. Nicaragua was 36%, and now it's 18% from the States. Norway, 30%, 15% from the States. Costa Rica, 17%, 10% from the States. Jordan, 40%, now 20% from the States. Dominican, 10%, 10%. UAE, United Arab Emirates, basically Qatar, 10%, and 10%. In New Zealand, 20%, States 10%. Argentina, 10%, States 10%. Ecuador, 12%, States 10%. Guatemala, 10%, States 10%. Honduras, 10%, States 10%. Madagascar, 93%, States 47%. Myanmar, Burma, 88%, States now 44%. Tunisia, 55%, States now 28%. Kazakhstan, 54%, States 27%. Serbia, 74%, States 37%. Egypt, 10%, States 10%. Saudi Arabia, 10%, States 10%. El Salvador, 10%, States 10%. Côte d'Ivoire, 41%, States 21%. Laos, 95%, States 48%. Botswana, 74%, States 37%. Trinidad Tobago, 12%, States 10%. And Morocco, 10%, States 10%. So again, we get into some countries here that are not economic superpowers, folks. Honduras, one of the poorest countries in the world, we're only charging a 10% tariff. So why the hell was Switzerland charging 60 and Thailand 72? No wonder. This is, again, payback time. Madagascar, 93%. Why? I guess maybe they don't want products from the States. Maybe this is why. I don't get it. Maybe they want to get everything from, African nations. Regardless, Saudi, 10% is all they had as a tariff. Egypt, 10% is all they had. El Salvador, they only had 10%. Morocco, they only had 10%. Again, Honduras, this is insane how Honduras only had a 10% tariff, and even United Arab Emirates 10%, Dominican only had 10%, Peru only had 10%, Argentina only had 10%, Ecuador, good, 12, fair, right? But now they're getting equal tariffs, and places like Burma, who had an 88% tariff, are now taking it in the reamer, because suddenly they're going to have a 44% tariff on goods coming into the States. And what that basically means is no one wants your shit anymore. That's basically what it means. So if you want your products to still be sold in the States, you've got to pay 44% tariff. My recommendation to you as a country, Laos at 95%, currently tariff the States. Botswana, 75%. Madagascar, Jordan, Costa Rica, Norway, Nicaragua, Vietnam, China, European Union, and the list goes on here. The highest I'm seeing here, Cambodia, 97%. What I'd suggest to you countries is you reduce your tariffs, and then you know what? Your tariffs for sending your goods to the States, the place you've been sending them, and the place where you want to continue sending them, your tariff will now go down in price. So I don't see these tariffs living for long. If any of these leaders had a slight amount of cognitive cognitive anything going through their minds, they would immediately say, we have to reduce our tariffs on the states, and then our tariffs for our exports going to the states will also be reduced. But I can guarantee what's going to happen is no one's going to have the foresight to even see that. And of course, no one's going to see my little show, my viewership. And they won't have the brow enough to see right through what is happening here. And instead, they're going to get all their cabinet together. They're going to have meetings. They're going to have all their governors together, the states, the provinces. They're all going to meet. And what are we going to do? 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 Weeks are going to go by. And then finally, with all their brain power, someone's going to come and say, oh, maybe we should reduce our tariffs, right? I can pretty much guarantee this is going to happen. So I think we've gone through quite comprehensively what these tariffs mean. No, this guy's not an asshole. This guy is saving the U.S., saving his country. Now, it doesn't matter what the country's name is. If this country was Portugal, and they were doing this in Portugal, or they were doing this in, Madagascar or anywhere, people would be saying, this is a great idea. They're taking things under their own initiative, and they're going to make their country better again for their citizens, right? But because there's such a reliance from the rest of the world on the states, including China being reliant on the market of the states, the consumer market, right? Everybody basically takes advantage of the U.S. And finally, someone with some balls comes out, and some brains, as far as I'm concerned, comes out and says, well, this is what we're going to do because this is what you've been doing to us. CNN and the whole world goes frickin' bonkers about it. Let's jump into our Bitcoin technical analysis. We definitely have seen some action on the biddy and kind of what it means for the biddy. Bitcoin made it up to 87,500 yesterday night, but I think it was kind of ramping up in sort of a buy the news, sell the dip kind of situation, and that's what we're seeing here. Currently down 1.5%, $84,000. Ethereum down 3%, 1,832. Solana down 5%, $120. XRP down 2.5%, $2.05. Doge down 3.5% to 16.5 cents. Crypto Bubbles shows us that for the day, it's about a 60-40 mix in terms of red to the green. If we go for the hour, though, almost everything's in the green for the past hour. So we should see, hopefully we see that, we're bottomed out and all the Trump talk is all now incorporated into the pricing, and hopefully we see a bounce from this point. Zooming out to the weekly, we have most things in the red. We've got EOS, the big winner, 45% up for the week, and actually kicking ass for the month, 58%, while everything else is down. Zooming out to the monthly, we still have EOS, like we said, 58%. Toncoin, 35% up. Chronos, up 36%. Curve DAO, up 32% for the month. And we've got about a 60-40 mix for the month in terms of red. So more red than green, but the green is making a comeback for the month. The total Bitcoin market cap as it stands right now is $1.65 trillion. Ethereum is $221 billion. XRP, $119 billion. Solana, $61 billion. Doge, $24 billion. Cardano, $23 billion. Tron, $22.5 billion. The total market cap for all cryptos is $2.65 trillion as it stands right now. We have a Bitcoin holding 62.8% of that. Ethereum, 8.3%. of the total market cap, and XRP 4.5%. We're currently in fear mode on the Crypto Fear and Greed Index. Yesterday it was neutral in 44, and last week it was a 40 in fear. There's currently 1,106 days left until the next Bitcoin halving, and 159,365 blocks left to mine until then. Total crypto total assets. Top assets by market cap. We've got gold 21.3 trillion, Apple 3.3 trillion. Let's get you to the charts. Let's get back here. We've got pretty much most things in the red. Again, for the month, here's a better look. This was the weekly view, and this is our daily view. And again, I was talking about the hourly view. I had you guys flipped on the wrong screen. And we've got our total crypto market cap here. Our numbers, again, just to refresh it, 62.8% of the entire crypto market cap is in the biddy. Crypto Fear and Greed Index, we're currently in fear. Getting back to the top assets by market cap, we're down to Microsoft, number 3 at 2.8 trillion, Nvidia 2.7 trillion, Amazon 2 trillion, Google 1.9 trillion, Silver 1.9 trillion, Saudi Aramco, the oil company, 1.7 trillion, Bitcoin 1.653 trillion, and Facebook 1.479 trillion. You can currently get 1,200, make that 1,193 satoshis for one fiat US dollar. The US national debt keeps on climbing, and I'm going to take pay closer attention to this. So the current US national debt, 36 trillion 675, make that 676 billion in the next hour. I'm curious to see if this debt clock starts slowing down. The debt per citizen right now is $107,239, and per U.S. taxpayer, it's $323,048. So I also noticed, and this just, I didn't even notice this, and it's been here for probably a month or a few weeks anyway. So the Doge clock. First of all, I didn't know that Doge had a symbol, and if you look at it, let's zoom in here a bit. Right, check it out. It is Doge with a police badge, and look what's in the middle. It's a frickin' Shiba Inu, like a Doge actual symbol of the dog that's in the Dogecoin. So interesting. I had no idea. I've seen the symbol before, but I didn't really ever get a close look at it like this. So what we've got here is the Doge clock, Department of Government Efficiency clock, right? How much they've saved? $273 billion frickin' dollars in a month. And what does that equal? $2,500, $2,431 exactly per U.S. citizen, per U.S. taxpayer. So I just don't get why everybody's leaning on this Elon guy. He has saved you $2,431. Everybody, okay, everybody, not one or two people, everybody, $2,431 each. So I think, you know, what's going to happen, same as always, the legacy that they're going to leave is going to be felt for generations in such a positive way. I just don't understand. I'm hoping they set a precedence for the rest of the world to see what kind of shit that their current government and administrations are, and what they could become if they just do a little thinking, right? Get some people in there with high IQs and do some freaking work for a change. Instead of complaining that your wages, your triple-digit wages are too low for sitting on your ass and not really doing anything, reduce the bureaucracy, save people money. These guys are looking like they're going to cut taxes by 100% on their citizens. Any other country doing that? No, right? But the biggest economy in the world can do it. So other countries are going to basically say, well, what the fuck are you doing for my country? Italy or Australia or Canada or every other country. What the fuck are you doing? That's going to start being the question. And hopefully the leaders of these countries get some kind of backbone and get some kind of brains in their administrations and actually start doing something. So I thought it was interesting that I brought that up about the Doge clock, because again, I saw it before, but I didn't really look closely as to what it was. There's just so much going on in this page, so I would always focus on what we talk about every day, and that's the U.S. national debt. But right there, bang, they have saved $250 billion in a month. So quite interesting, and I think they've got another month left. So I was reading the other day they could save very close to $1 trillion when all things are said and done. So if they're saving $1 trillion, then that would be very close to $10,000 per U.S. citizen, per U.S. taxpayer that they've saved you, folks. So why isn't CNN talking about that? Someone answer. Anybody. I'd love to hear your comments. What I do know for sure is that there is tons of money around the world, folks. Assets are abounding. There are approximately $900 trillion in assets around the world. Go out there, get your share. Money is abundant. Money is everywhere. It's time that is scarce, so spend your time wisely. Always spend less money than what you earn. And if you suddenly start making more money, start saving more money. Don't start spending more money, and start saving and investing today, especially if you're young. If you're in your late teens, early 20s, start investing. And ideally, you can retire when you're 40 or 45. If you've got a great idea, don't wait for tomorrow for it. Start today. Even if you're not ready, start your idea. Things will slowly come together, and your idea will come to fruition. And even if it doesn't work out for you, you'll at least have the satisfaction knowing that you tried, and not this regret thinking, I had this great thing, but I never actually went through with it, right? Because this is something that could haunt you forever, the not trying part. The trying and failing, you know what that just means? You learned. That's it. You learned. Now you know better for the next time. But not trying at all, you end up living in regret. At CryptoNews Global, folks, the idea here is to get to over 1,000 subscribers this year. So I'd love it if you help join this journey on the subscribership. It's 100% free. All you got to do is hit the subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it. I'm going to keep coming to you with the latest news in crypto and stories from around the world, folks. You see how it is. It's not always about crypto. Sometimes it even gets political here. Depends how heated the world playground is at the time. So if you found this stream likely useful, please share, like, comment, and subscribe on it. And we will see you on the next stream, folks. Thanks so much for joining.